Hey guys, just want to go over variations. At some point, hopefully, maybe within the next week or so, we'll go over programming as a whole, like kind of putting together everything we've talked about so far, and maybe different styles, and then my kind of long form thought process. That video would probably be upwards of half an hour. But I just got done training, so my mind not might not be exactly sharp for discussing this, but I've got another rain here, so we should be good to go. This is also my second time filming this because I didn't like the first one. I rewatched it. I just thought I could do better. So the topic here is going to be um, variations, right? So we've moved what intensity, volume, the purpose of programming or periodization, and now we're into variations, which variations to me aren't as important, but definitely need to be considered in the long run. And we'll start, so you can ignore the chart behind me, and we'll just solely pay attention over here. So, um, so that's variations at the top, right? The first thing I have is outcome oriented, and underneath that task. So when choosing variations, the first thing we need to consider is what what is the grand goal? What do we compete in? What are we doing? What is the purpose of our training, right? So the premise is that the training should, in theory, carry over to whatever our targeted competitive outlet or even just fun outlet. Like let's just say we just enjoy going to the gym, so we're just choosing variations that help us PR whenever we want. We don't have a competitive thing to worry about like powerlifting or say in the world of sports performance, we're not going to play soccer on 11v11 for an official team. We just play like five aside occasionally, and I just want to be a little stronger and faster, right? So, just to preface this, it won't be so much sports performance oriented because there's so many different questions, and I've not done a needs analysis to like put into video form. So maybe we can do that one time, but for right now, we'll just keep it in the realm of strength sports. But outcome oriented, what are we trying to get out of it? And task, how is that task leading to uh, us actually getting to that outcome? So then the question is, or I guess the better way of phrasing it, what is the intent behind the variation, right? So if I'm choosing a variation to do action X, right, and we'll just say action X will be keeping your back more upright in a squat, okay, and you're not keeping that intent in the variation itself, right? Like you're just going to front squat without any focus on that more upright posture, that upper back thoracic strength. Like cognitively thinking about it throughout the entirety of those sets, you're not going to get as much out of it, right? Um, you'll get something, but I don't think it would be as much as you might if you were like cued into the idea of, okay, I got to keep myself from rounding. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's the cue in my head to get that task done. Okay. So those are the two biggest things. Once you've solved what am I training for and what is the variation's purpose, right? What is it trying to fix? Okay. But how do we, what are the purpose of variations then? Or what am I trying to fix? I wrote deficit, right? Not deficit deadlifts, but you're lacking something. So you have a deficit. Okay. So, and there's never a surplus because you can never be too strong, in my opinion. Uh, but I wrote up here things like size. Are you just too small? And I'll run down the list real quick and we'll go through each. Technique. Is it a technical error? Do you just need to, you've got the size, maybe you've got the strength. You're just messing up somewhere in the chain of the movement where it's like he's strong enough to hit this. He just needs to fix this one little thing, right? And typically, technical corrections aren't one little thing. It's one thing, and then that helps us get to the next technical cue to fix, right? Okay. Strength. Are we not strong enough? Can we not produce enough force? Or maybe we've gone through a long hypertrophy block and we need to start utilizing the skill that is strength. Higher percentage lifting, like 90%, 1 RMs. There is a skill component to that. So if you've not touched those weights, you might have an estimated 1 RM that you should be able to hit, right? Like, let's say you did 185 for 8 and you can't even get 205 for 2. That sounds off, right? So maybe we need to work with some higher weights. And that is a strength component. It's just more from a skill aspect. But maybe you're just weak in a certain position, right? Maybe you just can't apply force properly from that specific joint angle. Or maybe that muscle group that's more responsible in that segment of the lift is not capable of overcoming the specific force at that position, right? So there's some nuance within strength. Size, not so much. But we'll go to the last one, energy systems. That's more for sport performance. But if you're a strongman, like, you're going to have some level of energy system development. The best example I could think of would be like the NFL Combine does a 225 rep test, right? I think it's kind of stupid. I don't necessarily think the 225 rep test tells me anything about an athlete's ability to play in the NFL. Okay, but you still kind of want to train for it because for whatever reason teams consider it important. So you still want to develop the energy system responsible for that test. However, I will say you don't always need to train that specific energy system for that intended goal. For example, I don't really do any high rep benching, but when we did our staff combine, I hit 225 for 26 reps. I was 5 weeks removed from a meet, and in the last year of it, probably had been 2 years since I touched anything over like 10 reps or even 8 on bench. So just there, sometimes our strength will carry us through lighter tasks. But if I had worked on that energy system development, I might have gotten 30. Who knows, right? So we'll just go up to size. I think size works a few ways. Are the muscle groups we're referring to just small, like just that specific thing? Like maybe we suck at lockout on bench and we just need bigger triceps because our triceps are underdeveloped because we bench so pec heavy or something like that, right? Or maybe you're 6'2" and you're competing 181. Okay, probably not your best idea. Okay, especially in powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting to a degree, and strongman, you want to be built like a fridge. Okay, I'm stealing this concept from Dave Osborne. You got fridges and you got sticks. Sticks break real easy. Boop, they bend, they break. Okay, fridges don't. Fridges are big, they're wide, and they've got a lot of space they take up. Okay, you want to be a fridge in a strength sport. Okay. There's exceptions to the rules. 99% of people aren't the exception. So if you think you're going to be, John Hack, who's I think 5'10" and 198, even then he's still kind of more filled out than I think most lifters really are. But let's just use him as the example. You're not going to be John Hack, right? John Hack is John Hack because he's John Hack, genetically speaking, all his training, et cetera, right? He's a different freak beast, okay? Don't compare yourself to him. Look at the averages in each weight class. If you walk into the weight class and you're losing it on a meet day, especially at a local, and everyone is like 6 inches shorter than you in your weight class, that should be a lights on idea about, oh shit, if I want to be competitively serious, I've got some ground to make up here. I've got to go up a weight class. It doesn't mean right away. Take your time with it. There's no need to add 50 pounds of weight in under a year, in under 6 months, right? That doesn't make sense. Take your time. But if you're just like, I just enjoy competing in powerlifting, I don't care how I do, stay the weight you're comfortable with, right? But that's just a difference. Is it a muscle group size that needs to be adjusted, or is it just in general you're not big enough to handle the loads that you want to handle? Okay. To that idea, I'm 5'8". I compete 220 or 198. I bounce around just depending on how I feel on any given year. Okay, my best totals have come 220 on the lighter side of 220, but 220. Okay, so keep that in mind. And even then, I'm still kind of taller than some of the guys I compete with. So lights on there. Look at the averages. Success leaves clues, right? So if most people in your weight class are 5'8", you might want to bump up a weight class, okay? To technique, there's a few reasons you could have a technical failure. One thing I hate hearing, oh, I misgrooved the lift. You're a raw lifter, right? You don't have shirts, you don't have squat suits or deadlift suits. There's the reason you misgrooved it and had a technical error is because you're A, weak, or B, your technique sucks. It's one of the two, okay? And even then, I think being weak in a specific position is a technical fault. Um, it's a shared relationship though, of course. So the idea of misgrooving comes a lot from geared lifting, where the suit is going to put you in a specific position, and if you're slightly out of it by like a hair, you might drop a bench on your face. Okay, so there's a few different reasons for technical error. Are you rushing the lift? Like some people will dive bomb their squat and they weigh 150 pounds, whereas like the heavyweight guys can get away with dive bombing because they have these huge bellies, nice and compact, big fridge like, bounces off the legs. There we go. Boom, dive bombing out. Because they get a little rebound, they've got a little more mass to keep them kind of in a more neutral or stable position. Okay? If you're 150 pounds, we might want to consider slowing that eccentric down a little bit. Okay? Or technically, maybe you just kept doing really shitty movement patterns, and that's just like, it's a thing. It happens. Like, you don't have a coach, like, get over it. You're going to have bad movement patterns somewhere. No one can be perfect. Okay. Second thing, maybe you had a coach, but they suck. So they wanted you to do a certain lift in a certain way that didn't work for your body type, right? So those are two type of coaches you'll come across. One who's like, I'll let you lift any way you want because that's your body type. Okay, well, that person hasn't been lifting that long. Like, why would they know how their body needs to lift? Like, they're never played sports, have shitty proprioception, are new to barbell sports. Like, maybe you should take the reins in a little bit and like, I want to execute it this way. Then we'll make the minor adjustments towards your limb length and how your femur sits in your hip and how your knees track with your ankle. Those are the things we can make after, but we still want a general schema of what we want our squat to look like or our bench. But then you have, on the other hand, guys like that dude who made Starting Strength, who's a geologist, I won't say his name, who wants everyone to squat looking down, right? Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. Just don't. I think there's better ways to squat, and we can go over a video for that anyway. But there's no one right way to lift. There's a certain technical aspect, like for squat in a powerlifting competition, hip crease below knee. Okay, that is literally the technical thing you have to execute. Okay, and the commands, of course. But that's it. That is the confines of technique. And then there's going to be, with a stable locked in core, okay? You're bracing well, your knees are tracking well. Maybe you have some knee valgus, not too much, your knees aren't touching or anything like that. But there's going to be slight variations within that, and that's everyone's individual form, okay? But again, there's no hard form that's absolutely true. But then we also shouldn't just let people do whatever, right? I'm not rigid about movement. But in essence, if you're telling me this is a bench press and you're pressing the weight over your head like that, that's not a bench press. That's an overhead press, right? So it's a spectrum. Okay, so consider that when we're looking at things like technique. Okay, strength I kind of already talked about. Energy system, I'm not going to get into too much, but maybe you just aren't capable of executing. Like maybe you can't get through a meet day, and there's ways to get around that, but I'm not going to go into them because I don't find that I'm absolutely gassed on meet day. So I've never really had to work with that problem. So I'm not going to act like an expert on it. Phase. What's the time of year? Okay. Are we far from a meet? Are we close to a meet? Do we not compete at all? Do we have any deadlines we need to meet? Things like that. Those are questions that also answer how these variations get implemented, what variations we might pick, and the intent behind the movement. Okay. So phase matters, or phase, block, time of year, whatever you want to call it, right? And then this part, accessories. Accessories and variations are different. They might ultimately be aimed at the same end goal, being a better lifter at, especially in powerlifting being better at squat, bench, and deadlift, right? But accessories, I think you can have a little more wiggle room. You can get away with a little more, okay, I like to do this because it's fun. I get some enjoyment out of it. maybe it's not the best thing to carry over. But variation, you're doing it, it's going to be a reasonably heavy load. Why waste all that effort if it's not going to help you? Okay? So just following from there, not talking about accessories, talking about variations. So a front squat to a squat, a a close grip bench to a bench, right? I'm not talking about a pec deck to a bench or a quad extension to a squat, right? Like those are accessories in my mind. Variations are things that closely mimic the movement itself with variations. Aha, right? That's the point of the name. Okay, some variance from the movement itself. So, just to get into it, we have our spectrum of specific and non-specific, right? So, specific in the realm of powerlifting, squat, bench, and deadlift, how you do it in competition. Okay, that is your specific work. Closer to the meat, be more specific. Further away from the meat, less specific. And that is really the answer to how you should play with your variations. But we'll get into it a little bit. Okay, if you're in a field sport or a track athlete, right? Weight room work is general. Okay, so benching, squatting, deadlifting, power cleans, throws, and to some degree jumps, right? Not the most specific to your sport. Let's take soccer. Is there jumping in soccer? 100%. But is jumping or squatting or a throw the same thing as the speed at which it occurs in the game itself, right? Like we have hip extension. Let's say we do a single leg RDL, okay? There's hip extension there, right? Absolutely. No one's going to deny that. There's hamstring stress, et cetera, et cetera. Can you do a single leg RDL at the same speed that you're going to snap your hips and leg forward from a back position, from your leg being behind you forward to kick a ball? No, absolutely not. The speed is different, right? So in the conversation of specificity, there's also a component of movement speed, right? Powerlifting, you don't need to be as concerned with that, but it's just another thing to think about when programming, right? I think the easiest way to consider it is like if you take an Olympic level sprinter, every time they hit the ground, you put about and this is Olympic level, like 2.5 tons of force every heel strike, or every time their foot strikes the ground, which is like every half second. Like you don't produce that force in the weight room. You can help with that, but there's never a moment you produce that much force that rapidly in the weight room. Never. Doesn't mean the weight room's useless. It just means it's not ever going to be the same degree of force, of stress on the body as actually sprinting, as actually full vertical jumping, et cetera, right? So those are different demands. But let's just take ourselves back from that tangent and go back to specificity versus non-specific, right? So if it's a bench press, right? Let's consider competition bench press. That's specific, okay? So that's where we're at with competition bench. If I'm close to the meat, my variation should be some shade in here, okay? If I'm further away from the meat, I might want to be over here, right? So over here somewhere might be an overhead press. It might be an incline press. It might be a decline bench. It might be an extremely wide grip with my feet dangling in the air. There's differences, right? It's not the same thing. I'm not doing it the exact same. Whereas over here, maybe it's just a close grip bench setup's everything the same, just a closer grip, or a slightly wider grip, okay? Even slight variations like that still change the lift to some degree. You could also say maybe a pause bench, or a tempo bench, or a Larson press, right? But as we start moving things, the more we move them, the less specific they get, right? So a front squat compared to a regular squat is still a squat, not as specific as, say, a high bar is to a low bar. Similar, not as specific though, okay? So this is where phase comes into play. If I'm further away from a meet, I can probably guarantee I might be better off for a little bit doing a little higher volume of non-specific movements. Let's remove some of the stress, some of the tissues more associated with the specific movement. I know for a fact I don't low bar after a meet for quite some time because my elbows and my shoulders hurt. I'll put an SSB on, I'll front squat, I'll high bar, right? All these things still should to some degree improve my low bar squat, okay? But they're going to be different stressors on the tissues involved, right? Like it's not that necessarily my shoulder is involved with pushing the low bar squat, but the amount of rotation required to get my shoulder back to stabilize is, right? My elbow, that force, that kind of turn on the elbow there, that's going to bother me to some degree. So that's why I might say, yeah, I'll take the SSB for a little bit. Plus, that's going to help me work on that thoracic position in the long run, right? So these are just examples of how I'm thinking about my programming month to month, block to block, however you want to say it, okay? So let's just get into this chart real quick and then we'll go ahead and be done. Let's just use bench, right? I'm just coming up with examples. None of these are true fixes, okay? And I'll explain that afterwards but we'll go through it first, right? So maybe if I'm having technical errors, I'm not good at maintaining kind of that tightness in the upper back on the way down. I just rush it sometimes. Maybe I'll do a tempo. Maybe I'll do 4 seconds down, I'll pause it, 4 seconds up, maintaining that tightness the entire way through. Associating that kind of movement pattern with my back needs to be here. This muscle needs to be doing this. I can't flare my elbows too early. It has to be right in this groove, right? Okay? Or maybe it's a pause. Maybe I just need a little more work because in the prep for the previous meet, I didn't do enough pause benching. Maybe long pause benching because I have shitty judges who just want to see me die on the bench, okay? It happens. Some people just want to watch you pause for 8 seconds and then tell you to press. It happens, so be prepared for it, okay? Or maybe that pause bench, you don't have a problem with the eccentric, you don't have a problem with the concentric, but for some reason off the chest, you always just screw it up and you just relax your back. Okay, let's put pause in and then focus on that kind of upper back tension. My lats need to be here. My pecs need to feel like this. My triceps need to be doing this. And then, boom, when I do it as a regular bench, then my concentric should be slightly fixed. Because problems don't just happen in that specific position. Typically, the failure is a downstream event from something that happened prior. Okay? Typically, in my opinion. That's how I think about it. Strength. Maybe I'm just shitty at certain points of the bench. If it's off the chest, maybe I want to do just a dead stop bench from pins, right? So I'm starting with the bar slightly above my chest, no eccentric portion, press, bring it down, reset, boom, from a dead stop, right? Or a camber bar. So a camber bar, like a big kind of U shape, few extra degrees of ROM, similar premise as a deficit deadlift, okay? Or maybe my triceps are weak, so I need more tricep work. Okay, close grip. Or again, maybe my lockout sucks, so I'm doing more chains and bands. Maybe I just need more force production at a specific joint angle, isometric work, okay? So maybe it's right here, right? Maybe I get stuck right here at this kind of angle. All right, well, put something over it, like the safeties, and press into that for 5, 6 seconds, boom, then go over to a regular bench, and then do it, okay? Size. Okay, and here's the thing. Some of these can repeat over across areas. They're not hard truths. Okay, they're just examples of how I might think about it. And I didn't want to use the same ones over to give you a variety of examples to use. So size. Maybe my pecs are small. Maybe I need to do more incline work. Maybe I need to widen the grip, get a little more pec emphasis. Maybe my triceps, again, are small. So I want to do more tricep work, close grip, okay? Or camber, because again, longer range of motion, technically more stress. We would think that we are going to get more out of that movement as far as hypertrophy is concerned. Okay, last thing, energy systems. To me, do the task, right? In any sport, when we're conditioning, there's a degree of conditioning that has to be done for preseason and that kind of early phase of season. But at a certain point, practice should take over the conditioning. You should be hitting relatively close to game loads, if not more, across a week of practice. So if I just take that similar knowledge and apply it here, okay, it makes sense. It fundamentally makes sense that you'll get better at that energy system development the more you do that thing. It's literally that simple. Again, don't be so concerned with this from a powerlifting perspective. It's one rep, shouldn't be that bad. And if you choose your reps accordingly, realistically, one of them should be pretty fucking hard, and the other should be a PR. Okay, so one of them like 98%, the other should be a PR in my mind. Okay, and then the first attempt, something you can do for a triple. But that's kind of my thought process for how I'm going through my phases. Now, the reason I say none of these are specifically true and none of them are specifically stuck to this point is because everyone's weakness is different and diagnosing it takes time. So you have to find a variation that necessarily works for you. Okay? Example. I know two people who squat over 700. One loves front squats, says they work for him. The other doesn't seem to get anything out of front squats, and yet they still look, if I were to just look at them without really delving into it, I'm gonna go, yeah, like they both have upper back weaknesses. Front squat, right? Makes sense. A lot of people think front squats fix upper back weakness because it seems to help a lot of people. But I have a friend who just doesn't seem to get better at it. Like he's PR'd front squats over and over and over again. His squat doesn't actually move. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And we can delve into some of them here just to kind of explain it. When we're choosing variations, keep them in, keep running them. Don't just keep switching them. How do you know it worked to get you a PR if you didn't run it consistently without other variables, right? It sucks, but our training, and to some degree, we have to apply a kind of scientific method. Here's my hypothesis. Here's my, like a sample hypothesis. If I add SSB squat, then my squat should go up. And then my rationale is because I have a shitty upper back, so the camber is going to force me to be in position. Okay, so then it works two ways. How am I going to do that? Well, I have my training. There's not really a control group, right? I'll just have my training. I'll plug in my SSB squat, which is what I'm doing right now, right? In my own training. I'll run that for 12 weeks. Do I feel like my upper back is stronger? How do weights that I've touched before feel on a regular bar? How am I moving under heavier loads with a regular bar, right? So you have to keep asking those questions. You don't just get to shift it out and be like, it didn't work. You ran it for 3 weeks, okay? And if you're a beginner, it kind of sucks because every 3 weeks, any work you do is going to add up. So you have to think more long term, okay? So those are just kind of the considerations of how I'm thinking when I'm writing it. Now, the thing is, I don't spend 30 minutes thinking about this end on end when I'm writing myself a program, when I'm writing someone else a program. I've already conceptualized this and thought about it to the level of, okay, here's his weakness, here's how I think that should be fixed, here's the causes. It's that simple. You have to practice doing it. So don't shy away from thinking of it and trying to problem solve. That's the only way you'll get better at it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it helps you with your own programming for someone else. I just hope you get something out of it that you can also, maybe you have your own coach, ask him questions about, right? Hey coach, you gave me and this other lifter the same variation, but we have different problems. Why is that? And a variation can fix two different problems. It's about the execution. He could be telling you to do it one way with a different focus than the other guy, right? Like, think of it from an SSB squat, right? Safety squat bar. It's got the handles. You're not putting your hands out here. If you push your hands way up here and the handles are now here, that's going to look different than if I'm pulling it down, okay? So be considerate of how there's multiple different ways to use the same variation. This different intent behind the same movement can cause different outcomes. So again, I wrote variations up here. They're not necessarily true for every single situation, and keep that in mind when you're processing these kind of things.